Hey, church family. So good to, well, sort of see you, I guess. It's awfully dark here. Um, the daylight savings time and winter have colluded together, and they've made it so that it's super dark nowadays, and you can hardly see anything. The days are getting darker, and as a bit that's happened, there's a thought that I've had that's been going around in my head. There's a couple of passages in John that talk about darkness, and I, I, I want to read them to you. I'm gonna have a difficult time reading to you right now. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be like Jesus, who brought the light. So all of a sudden we have light. Isn't that fun? Awesome. All right, there's just two passages that come out of the book of John that talk about darkness, and we live in a world that frankly is pretty dark sometimes, and not just sunshine gone or light bulbs off type of dark, but pretty dark. Some rough stuff happens in our world. And here's the two passages. So in John chapter 1, right in the very beginning, there's this fantastic passage. Now remember what John's talking about here. Let's look. In the beginning. So if you remember, what was it like in the very beginning? There was only darkness. Darkness covered the face of the earth. There was just nothing but darkness. Um, and so, I mean, in that space, it wasn't like evil. It was like literal darkness. There was no light. Um, but here's John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. And we know that later on in John, it talks about that the Word was Jesus. So through him, through Jesus, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it or understood it, depending on what version you have. The darkness has not overcome it. So that's a first mention about light and dark in John. And just a couple of chapters later, we have one of the most famous chapters in the whole of the Bible. And it's John chapter 3. Now, here's what's happening in John chapter 3. This Pharisee, and remember the Pharisees, for the most part, disliked Jesus because he was, well, what was happening when Jesus came along, Jesus was taking away their authority because the Pharisees were making it so that if people wanted to know God, they had to follow all the rules, and the Pharisees had piled a bunch of rules on the people, so that the people, the Pharisees were kind of like able to control the people, and Jesus kind of messed that up. So the Pharisees didn't like Jesus. So here in John chapter 3, a Pharisee named Nicodemus came to see Jesus, and here's what it says in John chapter 3, verse 1. Now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a member of the Jewish ruling council. He came to Jesus at night. So he came under the cover of darkness, so that when he came to see Jesus, nobody would know it was him. So he came at night. So now this is kind of like an allusion to darkness, right? He came at night under the cover of darkness to visit Jesus. And then look at what Jesus talks to him and tells him, in order to be, in order to go to heaven, you have to be born again. And Nicodemus and him have this whole conversation about what it means to be born again. But then the famous verse, right, John 3:16, Jesus gets to this point. He says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." And then he says this, just a couple of verses later. This is the verdict, or the judgment. Here's the line. Light has come into the world. Again, this is like a repetition of what John chapter 1 says. Light has come into the world, but men loved darkness instead. Men loved darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly what he has done, that what he has done has been done through God. So just that there's continued conversation or allusions or out and out displays of light and darkness through the book of John. But as we come into this season of up until December 21st, the days are going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. There's going to be more darkness, and that physical darkness. But there's also over our world, there's this spiritual darkness that's continuing to kind of be there. And you and I, folks, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, we are children of light, and we are a part of the light. But sometimes it gets hard in the midst of all this darkness. But what we have to remember all the time is that even though there's all this darkness around us, we belong to the light. We belong to the light. So just want to bless you as you go through this week, that you will experience more and more of the light. So whenever the darkness is around, whenever there's fear, whenever there's brokenness, whenever there's discouragement, when there's hopelessness, know that you belong to the light. And in the light, there's hope, there's joy, there's peace, there's all that stuff. So I just bless you. I bless you as you walk in the light this week. Know that Jesus has overcome. The darkness has not overcome him. He's overcome the darkness. All right, so I bless you in Jesus Christ's name. Have a great, amazing week. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.